reason that diabetes patients have been so responsive to these therapies is that heavy metals do something really nasty to the glucose metabolism.
Hi, I am Alu, and I'm your host at Fitero. Welcome to Fitness Pro Chat, the podcast by Fitero.
Welcome to Fitness Pro Chat by Fitarobic. If you're looking to improve your health and well-being to lead a healthy, fit, and fulfilling life, whether you're an amateur or a professional athlete, this podcast is for you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. I am extremely excited to welcome Douglas Mulhall today for Fitness Pro Chat with Fitarobic. Douglas is the author of bestseller Discovering the Nature of Longevity, a book that explores the link between heart health and environmental stress. He co-founded Elastin Therapeutics, dedicated to reversing cardiovascular damage. He also co-founded projects in Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Europe, and the US. He has published on calcification and heart disease in journals like Nature's Laboratory Investigations. Today, Douglas and I will explore how we can restore heart health and deal with stress. Welcome to the show, Douglas.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. I think that people are going to learn a lot today, and I'm so happy to be able to relay this information. Thanks very much.
First things first, Douglas, let me start with about your book. So, Discovering the Nature of Longevity, Restoring the Heart and Body by Targeting the Hidden Stress. What is the book about, and how it can help people who are suffering from heart disease and prevent them from adopting the conventionals to stay healthy?
Yeah, and the important thing is, it's not just for people who have heart disease, for people who don't want to get it. And this is a key thing, especially for younger people who are interested in fitness. And the book is really about hidden stresses. Now, the reason I call them hidden stress is because you can't see them, you can't feel them, you can't smell them, except actually with smoke. You can smell smoke, but you can't really sense what it's doing to you until it builds up to the point where it starts to make you sick. And that can either take weeks or years, depending on the particular situation. But the important thing here is that there are two major hidden stresses, one of which both the American Heart Association and the World Heart Federation, and the Indian Heart Federation is a member of the World Heart Federation, have declared low levels of heavy metals to be a major new heart disease risk that starts from birth. So this is not just for people who have a heart disease, although it's really important because it's been shown, treating this has been shown to actually reverse the impacts, but it's also for people who don't want to go there. And that's why I wrote the book, because I couldn't find a book out there that described these hidden stresses. The other one that's really important is low-level infections. And these are not exotic infections. These could be your average infections that lead to one basic thing, and that is chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation, as we all know, is a real enemy. And frequently it will show up maybe in some of your tests with low hemoglobin or whatever, but actually you don't know what's triggering it. And quite often people are not tested either for low levels of these heavy metals or low levels of these infections. So this is a new paradigm, and it's something that I didn't invent. It's something that is the result of more than 100 years of scientific studies and new pronouncements by some of the world's leading heart federations. And the key thing about the book is it tells stories. It tells stories of the doctors and patients and researchers and parents who are actually doing something to prevent and restore the damage from these hidden stresses. So it's very actively oriented. This is what people can do if they so choose to. And my expertise in this comes from being first the managing director and then a consulting special projects director for an institute that developed one of the world's most recognized protocols for the environmental safety of products. It's called the Cradle to Cradle Design Protocol. It's recognized by the United States EPA as being one of the leading healthy product certifications. And that's what I did and still do, have done for many, many years. And I'm also working with one of the international standards organizations to develop a global standard. And India is actually a member of this organization for standardizing the reporting on the healthy characteristics of products. If you can believe it, there is no global standard for reporting on the healthy characteristics of products. So we're about to fix that problem as well. So the book basically tells the stories, through the stories of these people, what can be done and what is being done today to prevent and reverse the damage from these hidden stresses.
Absolutely. I mean, that was quite insightful. And could you also help us understand what are the hidden stresses that impact our cardiovascular system, and what are the primary mechanisms behind the damage it can cause to the heart? Sure.
Keeping in mind that this is about solutions and not problems, so because you get depressed about it really easily. But
Absolutely.
We were just talking before the show about how in India and other parts of Asia, this is the season for a lot of athletic events because the weather gets better, but the air quality gets worse. And this is a big issue because one of the major aspects of air quality is, and a lot of people know about this, especially athletes, is these particulates. And every time you breathe in, you're breathing in millions of particulates. They're not all harmful, but today, many, many of them, according to, again, the American Heart Association and the World Heart Federation, contain these heavy metals and also pathogens from these bacteria and viruses. So you're breathing these in all the time. And, if you're doing something like running a marathon, you're breathing them in big time. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't run a marathon, but you should be aware that when you're doing that, you're inhaling, substantial amounts of these. And so you've got to find a way to get this stuff out of you. And here's why. Because what happens is when these particles get into your lungs, the really small ones, they bypass the blood-brain barrier and they bypass the lung barrier and get into your lung, and they lodge in your tissue all over your body, in your heart, in your arteries, in your brain, and they start to cause trouble. What kind of trouble do they cause? Well, these toxic metals, and when we're talking about toxic metals, I'm referring first to the ones that have been identified as the major heart disease risks, and that is cadmium, lead, and arsenic. Those three things. And as a lot of people know, lead is in a lot of our products these days. True. A lot of people think that just because we got rid of leaded gasoline that it's gone. It is not gone by any stretch of the imagination. And the medical journal, The Lancet, pointed this out, that lead is actually ahead of smoking and of cholesterol as a leading cause of heart disease deaths, in case anybody had forgotten about it. So this is a big issue. So what happens is that these heavy metals lodge in your tissue, both in the outside the cells, but also they get into the cells. And when they get into the cells, they do three things. The first thing is they damage your DNA. So they cause mutations in DNA that can lead to cancers. So they are carcinogenic. The second thing is that they trigger, because of that, a chronic inflammatory response by your immune system, a low-grade and chronic inflammatory response, because your body interprets this, rightly so, as an injury. So it wants to get that out, and the way it does that is through inflammation, which is why so many people suffer from low-level chronic inflammation, and that inflammation is the first trigger for things like hypertension that lead to heart disease, and hundreds of millions and even more than 1 billion people have got hypertension, and this is an inflammatory condition leading to heart disease. The third thing is it interferes with your neurons, your neurological signals in your brain. Very obviously why, if you take 2 live wires and you take some metal and you cross those live wires, what do you get? You get a short circuit. Well, that's exactly what's happening in your brain. when these heavy metals lodge in your neurons so that your neurons start to misfire. And this study that was just published in The Lancet said that as a result of this, the neuronal damage is resulting in a serious reduction in IQ of children, especially in countries like India. So all three of these things are really a problem, and they're twofold. The problem is they start from birth and they accumulate in your body. So they build up and they build up. And your body can naturally get rid of some of them, but it can't get rid of all of them. And so they start to build up. The second thing is these have been with us ever since humans started to walk the earth, except we've increased them exponentially through our use in industry. But, people in their 30s, 5,000 years ago, from bodies that have been recovered in India, in Egypt, in the Italian Alps, all show signs of these metals that have triggered heart disease. And so these people actually died or had heart disease at a very young age. This is nothing new. And when you think about that, it starts to make sense why, although our average life expectancy is increasing, it's still bumping up against this 120-year ceiling that we've never been able to overcome with all of our improvements in average longevity. And that's because we all turn to stone eventually. And the reason for that is the chronic inflammatory response leads to hardening of the arteries. It's quite simple, although the biochemical process is quite complex. So all of those things come together in a perfect, nasty, toxic storm, and that's what causes the problem. It's the same thing with these low-level infections. They also provoke this chronic inflammatory response, and all together, this is known as total stress load. And again, that's why I call it hidden stress, because total stress load is the sum total of all of these metals and chronic infections that are inside all of us. And so we need to start paying a whole lot more attention to this due to the science that has come out. And this has been happening, this science has been happening over the last 100 years, but only this year have a lot of official pronouncements been made about the impacts of these low levels that most testing does not show.
That's both intriguing. At the same time, I would say eye-opening in terms of the information that you have provided. I'm sure a majority of people would not know the kind of impact that we are subjected to with environmental stress, and we with all the pollution that's happening around us. What is that we are inhaling? What kind of metals that we have right now in our bodies? Probably we need to get some medical test and check the level of metals in our body at this point in time, and probably start moving towards taking certain preventive measures that can help us stay healthy in the long term.
Yeah, and there's one thing I'd like to emphasize, and that is that India and other Asian countries are actually have an advantage over North America and Europe, because North America and Europe are stuck in this standard medicine paradigm. And India has actually been a leader in two areas. One is going for low-cost generics, which is a really good idea. But the other thing has been combining the traditional medicines that standard medicine always makes fun of and always claims that there's no clinical trial evidence that they work, which is absolutely wrong these days. I want to emphasize that. In the past 3 or 4 years, there have been hundreds of clinical trials on these traditional therapies that are showing results, especially with, for example, things like spices and these types of remedies. So people who claim that there's no clinical trial evidence on this stuff are thinking 5-10 years ago, but they're not thinking today. And all you need to do is go to the clinical trial websites and you'll see the results of these. So to be clear, India and Asia actually have an advantage ahead of we silly North Americans and Europeans who are still stuck in this traditional medicine paradigm.
That adds a lot of insights to all of us and all the listeners of this podcast. So I was reading the foreword in your book, and it talks about the Bermuda Triangle of bias that the patients must traverse to receive the treatment that they deserve. What type of biases are we referring to here when treating heart conditions?
Yeah. First of all, the foreword was written by Dr. Gervasio Lamas, who is the chairman of cardiology at Columbia University and the chief author of the recent American Heart Association scientific statement on the impacts of low levels of heavy metals. So he's quite authoritative. And
Absolutely.
for those of you who don't know what the Bermuda Triangle is, it's this triangle sort of creates South Carolina, more or less. And that's where all the ships and airplanes used to mysteriously disappear until they actually figured out that it was rogue waves and a couple of other things that were happening, including large methane bubbles that were swallowing up these aircraft and ships. So it was called the Bermuda Triangle. And the reason that Dr. Lamas used that term is because he's actually from Cuba. He was part of the Cuban refugees that came across to the United States. And the reason he uses that term is because bias is kind of like a deep hole that things disappear into because of preconceptions. And this preconception is caused by the training that is given to medical professionals in medicine. That's not to say that the training is bad or that we need to throw it out, but it does come with certain built-in prejudices. And one of those built-in prejudices is that using nutraceuticals, vitamins, nutritional approaches really isn't that well proven in the science. And, we need to rely on the standard drugs and surgery, which are, much better proven. And this has been, as Dr. Lamas points out, he was one of them. To be clear, he was one of these skeptics who was approached by his patients and asked, should I be looking at things like chelation therapy, which we'll talk about in a moment, and, nutritional approach? And he basically said, this chelation stuff is for the birds. Really, you don't want to do it. It's dangerous and it's not proven. He was driving home that night and he realized he had no factual basis whatsoever to tell that to his patient. So he decided to actually do a clinical trial that disproved these therapies to show that they really didn't work. And then he would have the evidence that he needed. So he convinced the U.S. National Institutes of Health to do a $35 million, 10-year study on this therapy that, by the way, is really essential for removing these heavy metals, and that's why we're talking about it right now. Yeah. And so that was between 2008 and 2015, and it was a double-blinded, randomized study, so very high-level clinical trial, and it was supervised by the FDA, who gave them a lot of trouble, so they had to be really careful about doing it. So when the results were unblinded in 2015, no one was more surprised than Dr. Lamas, as well as the heart associations, when they discovered that there was a 41% reduction in all causes of death. I want to emphasize that, all causes of death amongst diabetic heart patients. A 41%. Now, if a drug company had gotten that kind of result in a phase 3 clinical trial, you can bet that the world would know about it pronto, and that the FDA would be running to approve this for what's known as compassionate use or special access. And, this would be happening around the world. Is it? No, it's not. Why? Because of the Bermuda Triangle of bias. Not invented here, doesn't work. Nah, we don't believe this. And by the way, it's not profitable. So this therapy is off patent. It's been around. It's been used for the past 30 years. And what this clinical trial did was it proved its safety and efficacy, its effectiveness. So the biggest barrier to it is the Bermuda Triangle of bias. And that has to do with the training that standard healthcare providers have taken. And I want to emphasize also that this therapy is available in India. And I believe it's practiced actually quite a bit more. On the other hand, there's the same type of movement in standardized medicine, call it voodoo medicine and all these other things. But anyways, it is available. And also, there are some oral nutraceuticals that have a similar effect. And there are some foods and spices that have chelating effects to get rid of these things. So anyways, I'll stop there. That answers your question about the Bermuda Triangle of a bias based on not invented here, don't know about it, and it's not profitable.
I say I'm just loving this interaction because there's just so much of information from you and quite intriguing and mind-boggling even for me. My father suffered he was a heart patient. In 2015, he suffered heart attack and eventually after bypass in 2020, he passed away. But
my father had exactly the same thing. That's one of the things that sparked me to write this book.
Absolutely. And then that sparked me to start something called Fit Aerobic because I wanted to take the message to the world how dangerous bad health can be. We don't realize it, but gradually whatever we eat and the kind of sedentary life that we lead, gradually it eats and degrades our internal systems and organs, and eventually we are left to do nothing.
And that's exactly why I wrote the book, because the book actually adds to what you're doing. So a lot of people have read about, and I'm really happy that you have taken the initiative to add on to that, fit aerobics, marathons, exercise, it's really important. Healthy diet is really important, but it will only partially protect you from these hidden stresses. We need to do something else as well. And that book is about the something else. So Discovering the Nature of Longevity is about the something else that you can do on top of the regular things. And that's what makes the book unique.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So coming back to my question, so you mentioned about the Jekyll and Hyde effect, wherein our immune system protects us from short-term threats, but turns against us in the long term. So what are the reasons behind such responses by our bodies?
Well, a lot of people haven't heard about, younger people haven't heard about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but it's a 19th century novel about a doctor who invents a concoction that is designed to actually improve health and ends up turning him into a schizophrenic, maniacal murderer. And so Dr. Jekyll, the good Dr. Jekyll, ends up spending all of his time covering up the misdeeds of his nasty Mr. Hyde schizophrenic counterpart. And that's why the reason it's called the Jekyll and Hyde effect is because basically that's what your immune system is doing. So the problem with your immune system is it's really great for getting us out of short-term trouble. It has this inflammatory response that goes and chews up the dead tissue that is caused by injury and infections, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a really essential part of keeping you out of trouble in the short term. But, in the long run, we are victims of the fact that we are a very young species, Homo sapiens. We've only been around for like a few 100,000 years compared to millions and millions and millions of years for species like the bowhead whale and types of sharks that are living, 250 to 350 years, and they have a brain to body ratio which is similar to ours. So they're very smart, and they don't. So that's an important point. So there's some of these animals out there that have the same brain to body ratio as us that are living a lot longer. They've evolved, obviously, a better response to these hidden stresses. So it is possible. The human body hasn't figured that out yet. So the result is that the immune system turns on itself through this chronic inflammation. So it starts to turn on itself. And I just want to give you a visual example, and you can tell me where to place this. So this is the elastic fiber that helps your body breathe, helps your heart pump blood, helps your arteries expand and contract, and all your organs be flexible. This is called elastin fiber. This is not collagen. It's
Yes.
elastin fiber. So
Yes.
on this side, and for those who are listening, what I'm showing is two pictures. One side is a really nice, pristine fibers that are in the arteries, and that's in a 6-year-old. On the other side here is a real mess, and that is the degraded fibers in a 90-year-old. Okay? So that is what these hidden stresses are doing to us. And so we need, especially people who are athletically inclined, need to find ways of minimizing that problem. And that's what this is all about.
Absolutely. I mean, that was, again, very informative. So the common guidance, and you just talked about it, that half of the problem is fixed when we adopt most holistic, like what most holistic practitioners talk about in preventing heart disease, like doing mindful eating, exercising, sleeping, reducing stress, avoiding bad habits, and supplementing. So are these enough to increase our longevity?
Well, they are enough to increase average longevity. However, I will emphasize that in the United States right now, average longevity is decreasing. It started about 3 years ago. So this myth that everyone is having increased longevity just got reversed. And there are parts of Europe and Eastern Europe where this is happening as well, especially in countries like Russia. So it is not a universal truth that we are always on the upwards path towards average increase in longevity. But the other answer to your question is no, not on breaking through the glass ceiling of 120 years. No one has ever lived beyond that as far as we know. And the reason for that is because of these hidden stresses. So yes, they will help. No, they won't get you to where we need to go. A lot of studies have shown that the human body is capable for going on for a couple of 100 years. And the fact that some species of whale and shark already live that long is proof of that. So, and again, they're not, low intelligence animals like turtles that live to be several hundred years old. These are really smart animals. Yeah. So there you have it. We have the capacity to live longer. We just need to figure out how to keep these constant stresses away from us and out of our bodies.
Absolutely. So next question that I have is, why does the standard medical care that's available right now do not reverse heart condition? And is there any change we see based on available science-based evidence that you would have come across to cure heart diseases?
First of all, we have created a global sick care system, and for a good reason. And that is that people have been demanding therapies to keep them going while they earn a living. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. And, it all came out of basically this combination of science progressing with pharmaceuticals and everything else to the point where we could do that kind of thing, which is relatively recent. And the post-industrial revolution, the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, when all this science was progressing, but we were also drinking and smoking and doing all kinds of bad things to ourselves just to get through, the day and get our work done and build the economy and all of those things. So we demanded this, and the pharmaceuticals and healthcare industry obliged that and came up with all of these things to keep us going. But they didn't cure us, except with the important exception of antibiotics and vaccines. As we know, with antibiotics, that was short-lived because now we're getting antibiotic-resistant regimes and infections that are turning against us. And the other thing about this resistance is that it is also causing this chronic inflammatory response. Vaccines have been successful, and that has been a large reason behind a lot of our increased longevity. But we're also starting to see resistance to some of these vaccines. So all in all, and then there's the other 90% of the system: surgery, drugs, all the stuff that's designed to keep us going but doesn't cure anything. And so, answering your question, the short-term sick care industry has been successful in keeping us going, but it is now collapsing under its own weight, because as we are living longer and we don't get these childhood diseases as much anymore, and especially in India, this is really coming up now, there's a problem. And the problem is that as we're getting older, we're getting all these chronic illnesses that are caused by these hidden stresses, and the system cannot deal with it. And COVID was the straw that broke the camel's back. So, because COVID was largely the result of people with chronic heart conditions. The vast majority of people who died and went into hospital had high blood pressure, some form of chronic heart condition. And if we didn't have that, COVID would not have been nearly the pandemic that it was. I'm not saying it would have been prevented, but it certainly would have been a lot less alarming and fatal, and the impacts on our economy would have been a lot less. So what does that say? We need to get rid of these hidden stresses that are causing this cardiovascular condition.
Absolutely. So most uncontrolled diabetes typically leads to heart conditions. And so is there a way, medically or via alternative treatment, to reverse this problem that is faced by patients?
Right. So people with diabetes who are listening to this, listen very carefully. The clinical trial that I spoke about had this 41% reduction of all causes of death in diabetic heart patients. All right. Now, after that, another clinical study was done by the same cardiologist who performed the large NIH study in patients who had a condition called peripheral artery disease, which is a real problem in India and in Asia, increasingly, due to changes in diet and increases in pollution and other things. What this does is, it's a form of heart disease that cuts off the flow in your arteries, and the result is that the artery either has to be replaced in a fairly painful operation, and there are millions and millions of these around the world every year, or when your toes turn black and you get lesions on your legs and the circulation is cut off, the leg has to be cut off. And there are literally millions of these operations every year around the world as well. So 25% of those patients die within the first year. It's a catastrophic loss of quality of life. So these cardiologists who were facing this problem decided, okay, we've proven the safety of this therapy. We've proven that it's effective in diabetic heart patients. Let's try it with these peripheral artery disease patients. The results were stunning. After these patients were all scheduled for amputation in the near term. They took this therapy for up to 40 weeks of weekly infusions. And so 40 infusions. And at the end of the day, they were all walking around on 2 feet, no amputations. Those toes were pink and the lesions had healed, and the results were reported in peer-reviewed studies that were published in 4 peer-reviewed publications. Have you heard about this? No. Most people haven't heard about it.
Absolutely.
Why? Because most people haven't been told about it by their healthcare providers. Why? Because their healthcare providers are not trained, as the American Heart Association statement has said, not me, has said, they're not trained in how to diagnose, treat, prevent, or otherwise deal with these heavy metals that came out of these patients. What happened was the therapy flushed large volumes of heavy metals out of these patients when the baseline blood tests showed their heavy metal levels were within acceptable limits, except when the infusion started. For example, lead, 3,300% above the baseline test started coming out of these patients and came out of them for quite some time. As those metals in the tissue of the patients were reduced, the patients got better. And this was the other side of the causative aspect of these hidden stresses. This proved that not only after 100 years of science proving that it triggers the disease, when you get rid of them, the disease goes away. And so this is really incredible. And again, if a drug company had done that in a clinical study, you can be guaranteed that you'd hear about it all around the world. No one has heard of it. That's why the American Heart Association decided to issue this statement that says we need to take a second look at this stuff now that it's been proven to be safe. And in India and other parts of Asia, this is critically important because doctors are far more open to this type of approach. Having said that, I'll also say that the standard medical practice has become very well established in India, and they still think this is voodoo medicine. So it's the same type of argument going on in South Asia. And again, that is why I wrote the book, so that, people could have access to this information. And a lot of it is on the website as well, I might add. So there you go.
Absolutely. And I would definitely would love to mention the address of the book. So it's called natureoflongevity.com that all of you must visit and read about Douglas' book.
Yeah, and also there's a short name, it leads to the same place, called calcify.com. It's CALCIF as in Frank, Y, calcify, as in calcification, the arteries. So calcify.com, www.calcify.com, will take you to the same place. It's a bit easier to type in and to remember. So yes, that will lead you there. And the book is available on Amazon, including in India. And if you can't see it in India, just go to the Amazon.com website and you can order it and get it delivered.
Absolutely. So you also have referred to a material called elastic of life, and that gets damaged in response to stress. So help us understand the evidence that has restored the elastic of life.
Yeah, I'm going to start out by saying that the scientists that I am working with in the company that you mentioned at the top of the show, Elastrin Therapeutics, on the fiber that I showed in these photographs, which is the elastin fiber.
Okay.
The scientist is who led the team is Dr. Naren Vivahari, who graduated from Pune University in India. And he is now the head of a major biotech institute at Clemson University in South Carolina. And his team is the one that discovered how to restore the elastic fiber in arteries. And he and I, together with some other colleagues, have started this company, Elastrin Therapeutics, that we've raised a fair amount of money now to actually bring this to patients. And so I have to say that the discovery of the naturally derived substance that restores elastin fiber was made by a scientist from India. And it's just amazing what his team has done. And he's paired up with another scientist who's from Atlanta, Georgia, Dr. Charles Rice, to actually develop antibodies that target this damaged elastic fiber and allow this natural substance to be delivered directly to the fiber in very high concentrations and localized. And this is a huge breakthrough right now.
Absolutely.
And our sister company has actually used this to target what's known as aneurysms. Aneurysms are bulges in the artery that is caused by a weakening, a degradation of the elastic fiber in the artery, and then you get this bulge, and eventually it bursts. And it is often fatal. So our sister company has actually applied this substance directly to the aneurysm. This year, they proved in a clinical study that the growth of the aneurysm for the first time can be slowed and prevented from bursting. So this is now about to enter the clinic after it goes into a clinical trial. It's completely exciting stuff that we're looking at. And it all came out of the work that was done by this Indian scientist at Clemson University.
That's really amazing. So are there any supplements or alternative therapies that can aid in reversing or preventing stress-induced heart damage?
Yes. So there's, first of all, chelation therapy itself, the infusion consists of two things. One is a chelating chemical that grabs, that's the word chelation is Greek for a claw that grabs. It chemically grabs the heavy metals from your tissue and you pee it out in your urine. Okay, that's how it happens. The second one is high doses of multivitamins and minerals that are synergistic with the chelating chemical to help to restore the damage to the artery. So it's this combination that has been used, and people have to be really careful when you hear the word chelation because there's different kinds of chelation, and you want to make sure that it's the kind of chelation that was actually practiced in this clinical trial, or that is offered by a product that is available in India. It can be ordered. It's manufactured in the United States, but it's available in India. It's called Nanobac TX. I don't sponsor the product. I have no financial relationship with the company, but I have used their product. And it is an oral chelation that you take. It's 8 capsules a night. And it has this combination of EDTA and a proprietary combination of nutraceuticals and supplements that are even actually greater in number and variety than the nutraceuticals and supplements that are used in the IV, in the intravenous. And it has a pretty good track record. It's been around for 20 years on the market. And of course, almost no one in India has heard of it. It's going great in China right now because the Chinese market is really excited by this. But, a lot of Indian physicians will be very familiar with a lot of these nutraceuticals that are listed on the label. So the product is called Nanobac TX, and you can look at it at the company website, which is nanobiotechpharma.com, nanobiotechpharma.com. And the product, and you go to the Nanobac TX web page on that site, and you'll see it. The advantage of this is you don't have to go to a doctor's office, once a week to get this infusion. And there are arguments that it is less expensive also because you don't have to go to the doctor's office once a week. So you have the oral and you have the infusions, and they have been both shown in clinical studies to be effective at restoring the damage that is done by these hidden stresses.
That's really, most of us, or I would say very few people in India would know about this alternative therapy that's available, at least. So how can healthcare professionals and individuals work together to create personalized strategies for managing stress and preventing heart health?
Yeah, why don't some of the physicians in India contact Dr. Revitalize at Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami and ask him about these therapies that he has done? And why don't they contact Dr. Gary Mazot, who is the inventor of Nanobac TX? And I want to emphasize, his product has been continuously on the market for 20 years. Originally, the FDA gave him a lot of trouble about it because of claims that were made about the product that you can't make under FDA regulations, but that's all been settled. And so this product is available on the market, and Dr. Mazot is a wealth of information about the anti-inflammatory effects of Nanobac TX. So both Dr. Lamas and Dr. Mazot, I would recommend contacting them. If you go to the Mount Sinai Medical Center website in Miami, not in New York, but in Miami, you will find Dr. Lamas' contact information, and you'll also find it through the university, Columbia University in New York, where he is chairman of cardiology. There are other physicians who, when you go on the website, you'll see that they've been using this product. But Dr. Lamas and Dr. Mazot, I would say, are the two go-to physicians. And it would be great to organize a lecture by them, remotely. They have done this about the whole history of this and what it means and what it could mean for India. I know that they would both be very, very open to that.
Absolutely. I think that's wealth of information that I've just shared. I'm sure the medical fraternity should try and reach out to Dr. Lamus and take this ahead. So as we look into the future, what exciting advancements and research are on the horizon for preventing and reversing heart damage caused by stress?
Yeah, and that's, of course, a chapter in the book that we won't cover today in any great detail. Maybe we can do it in another episode. But
absolutely,
there's a lot coming down the pipe. Our company, Elastrin Therapeutics, and I'm a co-founder of that company with Professor Vivahari, we're coming down the pipe. So we are in preclinical. Our sister company has just entered clinical. And we're hoping to be in clinical trial within the next 2.5 years. And that addresses the whole arterial tree and the elastic fiber. And I believe it could be a real game changer in human health, in prevention, and in overall longevity. There are a whole lot of other technologies that are targeting other things, including bad cholesterol. And I want to emphasize, cholesterol isn't bad for you. It's the cholesterol that gets converted into something else by oxidative stress that is the real problem. And there are companies that are targeting that. Something I forgot to mention about diabetes, and I'm sorry because I didn't answer that question. The reason that diabetes patients have been so responsive to these therapies is that heavy metals do something really nasty to the glucose metabolism. And every diabetic knows about your glucose metabolism.
Yeah.
And it basically oxidizes the glucose and creates all of these glycation byproducts that lead to, guess what? Heart disease. And so when you get rid of that antagonist, heavy metal, you're getting rid of the problem, which explains why diabetic patients show greater improvement than other types of heart patients. So stuff that targets that is also coming down the pipe. And if you want to know more about it, read the book.
Absolutely. I think that's a storehouse of information. So that brings us to the last question for today's episode. So what are your recommendations to everyone who is either suffering from or has someone in the family who suffers from heart disease?
Well, there's two sets of things that you can do. The first thing you can do is the stuff that we've been talking about that is, first of all, watch your diet. India in particular has been really good at plant-based diets, and the sad news is that now meat is being introduced more and more into the Indian diet, which is, in my view, bad news because of a very simple thing. And that is that animals bioaccumulate heavy metals before they get to you, just like you do, your body does. Okay, so you're already getting a bunch of bioaccumulated heavy metals in this meat that is coming. So you're getting a head start on the nasties getting into you. So it's nothing political. A lot of people say veganism is political. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that just these animals, whether they're chickens or cows, or it doesn't matter, are bioaccumulating this stuff. So basically, you want to get that meat out of your diet by and large. The second thing that you can do is inform yourself. I have to say, go to the website, read the book, read why these hidden stresses are so important and what is actually being done about them. The third thing that you can do, and I know that this might be an affordability problem for a lot of people, but also there's hundreds of millions of people in India and South Asia who don't have an affordability problem, and that is put a proper air filter in your car and your apartment building and your home to keep out these heavy metals that are in the particulates. So most filters for your air conditioners and stuff like that are not designed to protect your lungs. They're designed to protect the machinery from being damaged. So you want to improve the quality of that air filter and switch them out, especially in places like Mumbai. You got to switch them out fairly frequently because otherwise they become part of the problem. Because they start to collect this stuff and then you get stuff growing in them and you get mold and you get all kinds of problems. So number one, much better air filter. Number two, switch them out frequently. That is one of the best things that you can do for your health for sure.
Absolutely. I really thank you, Douglas, for today's episode. It was really informative, and everyone should go out and buy your book. They should be on your website, read more about it and learn more about it, especially since heart problems are one of the leading causes of death. And India is also one of the among nations where heart disease is pretty common. Almost in every family, someone or the other is suffering from heart disease or diabetes.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Douglas.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's a wrap. Thank you for listening to Fitness Pro Chat by Fit Aerobic. We hope you had key takeaways from today's episode and learned something new. Don't forget to download and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And leave us a rating and review on your favorite platform. In the meantime, reach out to us on Instagram @FitAerobic or through our website, fitaerobic.com. And remember, failures will only make you strong and better learned. Take care, stay healthy, and live a fulfilling life with Fit Aerobic.